It's a drug war. Everybody wants to make it a trade war, but this is a drug war, and we're just trying to stop the carnage.
At 3:14 a.m., the silence in a quiet Georgia neighborhood shattered when federal agents moved in with a coordinated strike that seemed to come out of nowhere. Moments later, a Chinese courier linked to an $85 million drug pipeline was pulled into custody after months of silent surveillance. His arrest exposed a hidden connection tying Mexican cartels, Chinese chemical suppliers, and underground money networks together in one secret flow of poison. Investigators realized that this single man was a doorway into a criminal structure buried deep inside Georgia's suburbs, far beyond anything residents could have imagined. What happened next would reveal an operation far larger and far more dangerous than anyone expected. If you want to understand how this network grew in the shadows and how federal agents finally pushed back, subscribe now to Military Power and stay with the story. The first wave of raids across Georgia's suburbs revealed a truth that stunned even experienced investigators. They expected stash houses hidden behind boarded windows or abandoned warehouses near industrial zones. But what they found were luxury homes that blended into quiet neighborhoods. These homes sat on clean streets with trimmed lawns and bright porch lights. Families walked their dogs nearby without any idea that only a few doors away, high-level drug labs were producing fentanyl and meth for distribution across the East Coast. The calm appearance of these properties helped the network operate for months without drawing attention. Agents entered the first property in Gwinnett County and immediately realized the operation inside was far more advanced than anything they had seen in previous cases. The living room was stripped of furniture and replaced with stainless steel tables that held chemical mixes and drying trays. The walls carried marks from heat and constant ventilation, and the floor had stains from repeated chemical spills. Investigators moved through the hallways and found bedrooms turned into processing stations. Each room contained drying racks, filter systems, and industrial fans that ran for long hours. The burners and tubing in the kitchen were powerful enough to support long production cycles without interruption. In Johns Creek, a similar pattern emerged. The houses looked normal from the outside, but the air inside carried a chemical odor strong enough to make agents step back to adjust their masks. The basement contained layers of reflective insulation that kept the heat and smell inside. The ceiling had makeshift vents that pushed fumes through pipes leading out of the house. The cartel used compressors that reduced noise during production, which prevented neighbors from noticing unusual activity. The garage held large storage bins filled with precursor chemicals. These chemicals arrived from overseas and were repackaged inside the home before being transferred to other sites. Agents discovered that the materials used in these labs came through Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The cartel used mislabeled shipments marked as cleaning supplies, textile dye, or industrial solvent. These shipments passed through inspection lanes during shift changes or high-volume hours when oversight was stretched thin. Once they cleared the airport, the chemicals were moved through trucks that blended with regular suburban traffic. The substances then reached the labs where cooks converted them into fentanyl powder, meth crystals, and counterfeit pills. What surprised investigators most was the efficiency of the operation. The layout of each house allowed producers to move quickly from one step to the next. One room was used for mixing, another for drying, and another for packaging. Agents found pill presses strong enough to shape thousands of fake tablets in a single day. Some rooms had digital scales and sealing machines that kept the product fresh during storage. The structure of these homes gave the network a level of protection because neighbors assumed the sounds were normal household activity. These suburban labs produced quantities of drugs that could supply multiple cities along the East Coast. The amount of fentanyl stored in one property was large enough to cause mass casualties if released into public circulation. The equipment was arranged to operate without pause, which meant the network could respond quickly to market demand. The location of the houses near major roads allowed the product to move from the neighborhood to distribution hubs without raising suspicion. Agents noted that the group running these operations understood how to blend into American suburbs with precision. The discovery of these labs forced investigators to rethink how drug networks were using suburban communities. Instead of focusing on rural or industrial areas, they shifted into wealthy neighborhoods where few would expect large-scale narcotics production. The use of the airport as a chemical gateway made the operation even more difficult to track. The combination of hidden labs, quiet streets, and steady chemical flow gave the cartel an advantage that allowed them to operate beneath the surface for months. This chapter showed that the fight was far from over because each home represented a larger structure spread across Georgia. The next stage of the investigation would reveal how widespread the network had become and how federal agents would move to stop it. What would you do if a home in your neighborhood turned out to be a large-scale drug lab? The raids that swept across Georgia marked one of the most aggressive law enforcement offensives the state had ever seen. Federal commanders knew that the network they were dealing with was larger than a single suburb or a few scattered homes. They also knew that the only way to break a structure this organized was to strike every major point at the same time. The decision was made after weeks of planning. And once the order was issued, teams from the FBI, DEA, ICE, ATF, GBI, and local police prepared for a long night that would test their coordination and their strength. The targets covered almost every corner of the state, and the goal was simple. Every site connected to the cartel had to be taken down before sunrise. The operation began before most residents were awake. Convoys of unmarked vehicles rolled onto highways with lights off, while tactical teams gathered in staging areas. Each team received a location marked as a priority site. Some were homes used as labs, others were stash houses filled with product waiting for transport, and a few were small offices where couriers picked up instructions and moved cash between groups. Many of these places looked normal from the outside, which made the raids even more important. If the network was allowed to keep operating in these quiet neighborhoods, it would become harder to detect in the future. In the first hour, agents moved fast. At several locations, they broke through reinforced doors using heavy equipment. Inside, they found rooms packed with chemical supplies and machines used to shape counterfeit pills. At other sites, they discovered long tables covered with bag powder. The teams collected thousands of plastic containers, metal trays, and digital scales. Some of these rooms were set up with cameras and alarms, which showed that the cartel expected trouble at any time. Even with these precautions, the groups inside had little time to react once the raids began. Information from the field came in constantly. One team in the southern part of the state reported a warehouse built to store large drug shipments. Agents found boxes stacked to the ceiling and dozens of barrels filled with materials used to cook meth. Another team found a safe house where armed guards attempted to run, but were stopped before they reached the back door. These moments confirmed what investigators feared. The cartel had grown deep roots in Georgia and had built a defensive network that reached across multiple counties. As the night continued, agents seized more evidence. By the end of the operation, they had taken almost 4 tons of narcotics and more than 1 million counterfeit pills. They recovered hundreds of firearms from closets and storage rooms. Many of the weapons had been altered for higher firepower. They also recovered millions of dollars in cash that had been hidden in duffel bags and plastic containers. These items revealed how large the operation had become and how much money moved through the state each week. The scale of the raid shocked those who reviewed the final report. Few expected the network to be this widespread or this prepared. The success of the operation showed what federal and local forces could achieve when they worked together with a single objective. It also showed the size of the threat that had been developing quietly inside Georgia. The next phase of the investigation would focus on how the cartel used Atlanta's airport as its main gateway and how the chemicals moved into the state without being detected. If you want more stories like this, remember to subscribe to Military Power. What part of this operation surprised you the most? The investigation moved toward a new focal point when agents realized that the chemical flow feeding Georgia's hidden drug labs was far too large to come from small suppliers. The volume was steady and the types of chemicals involved pointed to a much broader system. All signs led to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, a place known for crowded terminals, constant takeoffs, and a level of traffic unmatched in the country. What made ATL an international gateway for travelers also made it the perfect cover for criminal groups that wanted to move dangerous materials without being seen. The more investigators observed the airport, the more they understood how the cartel used it as the beating heart of its operation. The first clue came from an unusual increase in industrial solvent shipments. These shipments arrived from several major cities in China and were labeled as cleaning supplies or textile products. The numbers did not match previous years, which made investigators question why so much of the same material was entering the state. Each shipment passed through inspection zones that were stretched thin during high-volume periods. Once inside the airport's cargo system, the containers blended with thousands of others. This gave the cartel the opportunity to move chemicals directly into Georgia's suburbs with little interference. Agents examined flight patterns and supply chains connected to the airport and realized that the cartel had designed its routes with precision. Containers arrived during busy hours when traffic was overwhelming and the flow of goods made supervision more difficult. Some shipments came in at night when cargo staff changed shifts. These windows created perfect opportunities for the network to slip chemicals through the system. Once the materials cleared the airport, they were loaded onto trucks that looked no different from regular delivery vehicles. These trucks traveled through neighborhoods and industrial zones without raising suspicion. The airport also became a major export point for finished methamphetamine. Atlanta's location made it ideal for direct flights to destinations with high profit potential. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore were among the countries that offered enormous street value for small quantities of meth. Investigators learned that a pound of meth produced in Georgia could earn many times its domestic price once it reached cities like Sydney or Melbourne. This profit difference encouraged the cartel to use ATL as a launch point for outbound couriers. Recruiters in nightlife districts around Atlanta approached individuals who had clean travel records. They offered large payments for carrying concealed packages on international flights. Many couriers did not understand the scale of the network they were working for. They thought they were running quick errands for easy money. Some were caught with hidden compartments inside their luggage, while others were stopped because of suspicious travel patterns. These arrests helped investigators map the cartel's global routes and revealed how far the influence of the operation had reached. Agents studying the airport's cargo structure found that the network's success came from blending in. ATL processed thousands of pallets every day, which made it impossible to thoroughly check every shipment. Criminal groups took advantage of these conditions by hiding illegal goods inside common items. The airport's enormous size allowed them to move material across multiple warehouses before it ever reached the suburbs. The sheer volume of legitimate commerce made the illegal shipments hard to identify. The discovery of ATL's role changed the direction of the investigation. It showed that the drug network was not limited to suburban houses or hidden facilities. It was tied directly to global supply chains that passed through one of the busiest air terminals in the world. This meant that stopping the labs alone would not be enough. Agents needed to understand how chemicals were entering the system and how finished drugs were leaving the country. The airport became a symbol of both opportunity and danger. It gave the cartel the perfect combination of cover, access, and international reach. It also reminded investigators that modern drug networks are not confined by borders. They use legitimate systems to support illegal operations and turn common transportation routes into strategic channels. Understanding ATL's part in the network prepared agents for the next stage of the investigation. What they uncovered next connected the flow of chemicals and drugs to a financial system that allowed the cartel to move hundreds of millions of dollars without being noticed. What do you think would happen if authorities increased inspections at major airports like ATL? The investigation into the drug network took an even darker turn when agents shifted their focus from chemicals to cash. They knew that no operation of this size could survive on drug sales alone. A network this large required a financial system that could move money across borders without drawing attention. What they found was a $410 million laundering structure that ran quietly through Georgia's neighborhoods. It connected shell companies, small family businesses, trucking firms, and cosmetic services that looked harmless from the outside. This system allowed the cartel to wash its profits and turn illegal money into revenue that appeared clean on paper. The first signs of the network appeared in Norcross. Investigators found a trucking company that advertised deliveries across several states. On paper, the business looked normal. It owned multiple trucks and reported steady income. When agents raided its warehouse, they discovered boxes filled with stacks of cash. The boxes were marked as ink toner, which made them easy to hide among regular shipments. Workers claimed they were moving office supplies, but the evidence showed that they were handling millions of dollars for the cartel. The money was packed in tight bundles and kept in sealed containers to avoid detection by dogs and scanners. Agents later identified a series of nail salons and cosmetic shops located in Duff, Chamblee, and Midtown Atlanta. These salons generated large amounts of cash each day, which made them perfect for blending illegal profits with legitimate earnings. Financial records showed deposits that did not match the normal flow of customer activity. Some salons made nightly deposits that followed the same cycle as cartel payments. The businesses operated with small staffs and extended hours, which gave them time to process money long after customers left. The salons became a quiet bridge between street-level activity and organized crime. As the investigation expanded, agents began to see connections reaching far beyond Georgia. Several logistics companies were used as fronts for international transfers. They handled shipments that moved between Georgia, China, Macau, Vancouver, and parts of Mexico. These shipments contained cleaning supplies, parts for machinery, and other low-concern items. Hidden inside some of these containers were sealed packages of cash. In other cases, money was sent through a series of digital transfers that moved through multiple foreign accounts before returning to the cartel. The pattern was consistent across multiple businesses, which confirmed that the network was using Georgia as a financial hub. One of the most concerning discoveries involved a company registered to a shell corporation. The business had no real owner listed and no physical office. Despite this, it processed dozens of freight containers over a 2-year period. Many of the documents had signatures from individuals who appeared to work in government offices. These signatures did not match any employee on record, which suggested that someone had helped the network disguise its paperwork. Investigators believed that certain officials might have been paid to approve permits and clear shipments. The case is still under review, and the names of those involved remain sealed. What made this laundering system so effective was its ability to blend with everyday life. The businesses were small and looked ordinary. Customers visited them for regular services and had no reason to suspect anything unusual. Trucks moved down highways without drawing attention. Money passed through digital platforms that processed thousands of transactions each day. The entire system relied on staying low and invisible. The cartel understood that hiding behind familiar storefronts offered more protection than hiding in remote locations. By the end of the review, agents estimated that the network had cleaned more than $410 million in less than 24 months. This discovery showed that the financial side of the operation was just as dangerous as the drug production side. It also revealed how deeply the cartel had embedded itself into Georgia's economy. Stopping the labs and raids was only part of the battle. Breaking this money chain would take even more time and resources. The financial trail now pointed investigators toward the final stage of the operation, where the impact of the network reached into everyday communities. If you want to follow the rest of this story, make sure to subscribe to Military Power. How do you think officials should respond when crime networks hide inside regular businesses? The impact of the cartel's hidden network struck the people of Georgia long before the raids exposed the scale of the operation. Many residents felt something was wrong in their neighborhoods, but could not explain it. The changes were slow at first, almost invisible. Yet, each shift pushed communities into deeper uncertainty. Parents began to notice unfamiliar cars parked near schools. Shop owners grew more cautious about who came through their doors. Teenagers whispered about easy money and fast jobs that required no paperwork. These small details created a sense of tension that grew with each passing month. One of the most alarming effects was the recruitment of young people. The cartel understood that teenagers were easier to approach and less likely to question what they were carrying. Recruiters targeted areas where families worked long hours and supervision was limited. They offered quick cash for simple tasks. Some teens were asked to pick up envelopes and drop them off at specific locations. Others were told to drive small packages across town. Many of them believed they were doing harmless favors for friends. They did not understand that these deliveries were part of a larger system moving drugs through the suburbs. Once the teens became involved, it was difficult for them to leave. The easy money was tempting and the pressure from the group kept them trapped. The rise in counterfeit pills added another layer of danger. Hospitals and emergency workers saw an increase in overdose cases among young adults and even middle school students. The pills looked like everyday medication, but contained lethal amounts of fentanyl. Families were shocked when routine experiments with pills turned deadly. Funeral homes in several counties reported a rise in services for teenagers. Teachers noticed students appearing tired or distressed. Some students vanished from school for long periods and returned with stories they refused to explain. These events created fear that spread through classrooms and households. Businesses also felt the weight of the expanding network. Many owners in areas like Duff, Chambly, and Norcross began locking their doors during business hours. They watched customers through security screens and opened the door only when they felt safe. Some feared cartel retaliation, while others worried about federal raids that could disrupt their shops. The sense of normal activity faded as residents avoided certain streets after dark. Night markets quieted and community events became smaller. Others stopped allowing their children to play outside. Local parks became quieter, and community centers saw fewer visitors. The fear created a sense of isolation. Even in crowded neighborhoods, it took only a few months for entire areas to feel disconnected from the rhythm they once shared. The damage went beyond numbers and arrests. It affected the emotional fabric of Georgia's communities. Cartel had rooted itself in Georgia. These findings also explained the rising fear across communities where teens were recruited and counterfeit pills caused sudden tragedy. This case proved that the threat was larger than any one neighborhood and that future federal operations will likely expand to confront the remaining parts of the network. If you want to follow the next stages of this story, make sure to subscribe to Military Power and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think should be the next move in the fight against these criminal groups?